is CNN.
Visiting a zoo or aquarium is practically a rite of passage for children around the world. But there's a move afoot to shut down these facilities. Behind it, animal rights activists whose battle cry is animal cruelty. Zoos and aquariums counter, saying they play a crucial role in education and conservation. Hello, I'm Catherine Crier. Welcome to Crier Company. City zoos and aquariums are under attack, both financially and ethically. England's prestigious London Zoo appears headed for extinction next year. Low attendance and a losing balance sheet are being blamed. But there are other forces working against it. Animal rights activists who describe such facilities as nothing short of animal prisons. Zoo officials rebut with some insults of their own, describing the activists as flesh-eating vultures who descend on controversy before the body is cold. The fight is over what role zoos and aquariums play in society. It's unusual because it pits the people who profess to care the most about animals against each other. Joining me in today's discussion from Washington, Asis, Public Relations Director of the American Association of Zoological Parks and Aquariums, which represents some 160 professionally run zoos and aquariums in the United States. Nancy Blaney, the Director of Government Affairs for the Performing Animal Welfare Society, and Guillermo, Lifestyles Campaign Director for the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. Kathy, let me begin with you. Animals, the zoos, the parks started out as entertainment 100 years ago, but today some profess education. What's the real role?
I think we really do have to take a look at the history. First of all, zoos and aquariums are, frankly, relics of the days of freak shows and public hangings. They have loftier goals now. The zoos themselves are in better condition than they were at one time, but frankly, they are animal prisons, and we really need to take a look at what the stated goals are and what actually happens in zoos. There's really very little education that goes on. It's been shown that people actually spend more time at the concession stand and in the restrooms than they do looking at the exhibits.
Karen, what about that? If, in fact, they're not paying attention to the animals, why are they being locked up?
Well, first of all, Catherine, I don't think the animals are being locked up. When you talk about locked up, you're talking about constraints. There are certainly constraints in the wild, too. Disease, predation. There are a lot of... Right now, the habitat is disappearing at such a fantastic rate that many animals are existing in what we now refer to as megazoos in the wild. I think, Kathy, unfortunately, I think the animal rights people paint all zoos with a broad brush stroke. And there are some roadside zoos in this country that are absolutely deplorable, and I agree with her, they need to be shut down. But in terms of professionally run zoos, we're looking at zoos that are creating natural habitats for animals. Our technology, our research has helped us create environments for these animals that, as far as we're concerned, are making these animals live in an environment that is very comparable to what they would have in the wild.
Let me bring Nancy into this. Nancy, in fact, as zoos exist today, there are some fine natural habitats being developed, but that isn't the status quo. What kind of education do children get about an animal that is not behaving as it normally would because it is in a very confined environment?
Well, that's exactly the question. I think that the status really lies somewhere between the two. You do have some very fine professional zoos that provide good habitats where the animals are allowed to live in normal social groupings, where they can exhibit their natural behaviors, but you still have some quote-unquote professional zoos that have corn crib cages and bear pits. Now, a corn crib cage bears no more resemblance to a rainforest than an orca pool bears resemblance to the ocean environment that it belongs in. So when children or adults, for that matter, see animals in the kind of enclosure that does not allow it to engage in its normal activities, live in a normal social grouping, all the people are learning is that it's okay for humans to do this to animals. When you can see them in an exhibit such as the San Diego Wild Animal Park, where you've got to take a monorail, you see the animals on their terms more or less rather than on yours, you can appreciate how they interact with their environment. What's important is the animals in their environment, not how they adapt to an environment that we create for them. we're not really doing that in all cases.
We really do need to take a look at what zoos are teaching people, even in the very best of conditions. Even when the habitats approach what the animals will live in the wild, they are still unnatural conditions. What we are teaching children and what we are teaching people, many of whom are drawn to zoos because they care about animals, is how animals behave in an unnatural environment.
Well, Kathy,
created by human beings.
let me interrupt and ask you a question, because how natural is it really for human beings to live in boxes, to get in smaller boxes and move down concrete pathways and get in more boxes with unnatural air and polyester seating? Isn't this a condition of living on this planet to an extent?
Well, perhaps that wouldn't be the optimum condition for humans to live, but we at least have the option to do that. The animals themselves do not have the option to do that. And their endangered status in many cases has been contributed to by the trade in exotic animals for zoos and aquariums. If we really want to preserve endangered species, if we really want to do something to teach people about animals, we need to preserve habitat, not put animals behind bars or in natural settings behind bars.
But along that line, what about children who get taken to a zoo who all of a sudden can relate to what a giraffe is or what an elephant is? What about the argument that you preserve and protect what you know?
Are the children told that in a major zoo in the Midwest a lion drowned in a moat? Are children told that elephants are sometimes beaten in zoos? No, they're not. They're taught that animals can be captured from the wild, they can be placed in a zoo, and they can be looked at. That's what children learn.
Catherine, we have a number of problems here. I hope I can interject. First of all, gosh, so many things have been covered. Interrupt me if I get a little too long-winded, but you're talking about animals behind bars and antiquated exhibits. Zoos don't have instant solutions. We spent over $408 million in capital improvements last year. We'll probably spend a lot more than that this year. I think you're finding zoos are making every effort to turn things around. But for the most part, I think you're going to find that professionally run zoos do have humane, roomy exhibits, naturalistic exhibits.
Okay, well, let me interrupt you on that note, because we do need to take a break, and when we come back, zoo officials argue their breeding programs are key to saving some species from extinction, and we'll look at that issue of animal conservation when we come back.
Guess what coffee they serve at tea? 100% Colombian coffee, hand-picked by Juan Valdez, the richest coffee in the world.
Generations. To be part of one is much more than the simple matter of your birthday. It's to be part of an era. It's to have fallen in love to a rock band and not a big band, or to have played ball with an aluminum bat instead of a wooden one. It's to have done things as no other generation would. And yet it's also to share one idea with all of them. For every generation, there's a gap.
This year, brighten someone's Christmas with gold. A golden tool from the Skill Classic series. Give a golden tool this Yule from Skill.
You can count on Sears for great Christmas values, like this original DP ergometer, just $199.99, reduced $100. It measures pulse, speed, time, and distance. America's best seller at our lowest price ever, only at Sears.
We spend $7 billion a year on international aid. But do you know millions are spent building private homes, tennis courts, and a nearly vacant housing project? The Shocking Story, Monday, 6 and 10 Eastern on CNN.
Officials running the world's zoos and aquariums agree one of the key roles they play is animal conservation. The San Diego Zoo, for example, houses more than 150 species on the endangered list and has been vital in bringing back the California condor, whose sparse flock has grown from just 16 to 50. The world's aquariums have also been active in conservation, but recently the New England Aquarium in Boston has begun a new fight. It's filed a first-of-a-kind lawsuit against 3 animal rights groups, accusing them of making false statements about the aquarium and to filing frivolous lawsuits to harass it. But animal rights groups say they're merely trying to force some national policy changes, and they argue true conservation must begin closer to the animal's natural habitat, not thousands of miles away in a concrete cell. Some go as far as saying that saving the animals just to display them in cages isn't worth it. Nancy, what about that? If we've just got animals caged up somewhere, is that really preservation?
No, it's not, Catherine, and the issue here really is how much saving of endangered species is going on. There is quite a bit of work that has been done. Zoos have been successful in bringing back some populations from the brink and in reintroducing some. But that alone may not be enough to justify the continued exhibition of animals. Now, our organization is not a quote-unquote anti-zoo organization, but we do think that they need to start looking at these things a little more closely. When you've got propagation programs for endangered species going on, that's terrific. Let's start looking, though, at what we're going to do with these animals. What about habitat conservation? And the corollary to the propagation programs is the surplus problem that's being created, and the fact that zoos are propagating not just endangered species, but every species that they have for the most part, and some of them are being sold out the back door to roadside zoos, to circuses, and to hunting ranches.
Well, we're going to talk about that just a bit more later. Karen, what about the role of conservation?
First of all, I'd like to back up for just a moment, Catherine, and address something that was in the last segment. I think, gosh, I don't want to sound contentious, but I think that perhaps some of the animal rights people are suffering from what some of us call historical inertia. In other words, they're looking at the zoos of the past, 15, 20 years ago.
I'm talking about the zoos of today in Philadelphia and San Diego and San Francisco and Detroit and Baltimore and New York.
I think that they're looking back and they aren't looking at what we are today and what we're purporting to be in the future, and that's a lot different. Our missions have changed tremendously.
So what is the new mission?
The new mission, over and above obviously our priority of giving animals the most humane care we possibly can, is conservation. We know that 20 to 50% of biological diversity in this world is about to disappear by the end of the next century. So I think it's important for all of us to do our part to try and save our natural heritage.
But how much of that is actually going to be taken care of by the zoos? The zoos themselves have said at most they can probably house and quote, conserve maybe 300 to 500 endangered species.
You're absolutely right, Nancy. We can't take care of all of the world's environmental or conservation problems. We can do our very best. We are a way station for a number of endangered species that would be extinct otherwise.
And we've
already been very successful in returning a lot of those animals to, not a lot, but quite a few of those animals to the wild.
How many zoos really have reintroduction programs? And what about the habitats that have been completely destroyed when there is no place to return an animal? Zoos at their very best could be rehabilitation centers for injured wild animals
right,
with return.
Kathy.
Unfortunately, they're not at their very best. Unfortunately, they are businesses. In order to draw people into these businesses, there is overbreeding of animals. And what happens with the animals that there are too many of? They're sold to dealers who in turn may sell them for research, may sell them to small circuses, and may sell them to canned hunts, places where people can go in and pay to shoot a wild animal.
Well, Karen, you hit on an interesting and important point, which is the change in mission. And maybe it's not enough, though, to have that mission be just a mere extension now of what zoos are today, but maybe there's a real change that needs to take place, a real sea change, if you will, in that mission.
Nancy, I think you're right. I think zoos are realizing part of our problem is we've been successful. 20 years ago, we couldn't breed a lot of animals for a number of reasons. That's changing. So new issues are coming up, and we're dealing with them.
Well, I don't think the zoos are dealing with them very successfully, though, especially on the surplus issue.
Well, just recently, the American Association of Zoological Parks and Aquariums issued a brand new set of guidelines for the disposition of surplus animals. I don't know if you're familiar with it or not, but that's certainly a step in the right direction.
Well, Karen, I'll tell you what, I'm going to interrupt you there because we're going to come right back to that point on those regulations, because charges fly that animals are being sold by zoos and aquariums for use at hunting clubs and research. What about that? Stay with us.
Taking off for vacation this winter? How about hitting the slopes at a fun western ski resort with an Advantage Rent-A-Car Plymouth Voyager or Jeep Cherokee? Or You could hop a jet to the links of Arizona, rent a roomy Chrysler New Yorker, and golf your brains out. Or maybe head down to the Texas coast for fun in the sun in a LeBaron convertible. I hear there's even this nude beach down there. Just kidding. Advantage Rent-A-Car, the rising star in rental cars. Give us a call when you take off this winter.
Grandma's got a date. What's a date? That's when you hug someone.
Closeness. You might hesitate if you wore a diaper. So Johnson & Johnson created Serenity Guards, bladder-controlled protection so advanced it holds as much as something 5 times its size and stays dry, locking liquid in.
Grandma, are you gonna hug him? Hug me.
Oh. Give yourself hugs for discovering Serenity from Johnson & Johnson.
Bay's English Muffins proudly presents a symphony of flavors your family will applaud. Bay's English Muffins. They bring your favorite ingredients into perfect harmony every time. In your grocer's dairy case, Bay's.
GE Space Maker products. A higher level of entertainment for your kitchen.
The zoos and aquariums around the world vary greatly in size and in their handling of the animals. Some have cages, others have created vast open habitats. Then there are the roadside zoos. They're the facilities with a menagerie of animals, some good, some bad. Both zoo officials and animal rights groups oppose those types of facilities because of the inherent danger of abuse. Karen, I want to come back to you and talk about regulation. There was a horrific story about the San Diego Zoo, a zoo that most think is at the top of the list, and yet that they unwittingly, they say, sold animals to animal brokers that sold them to these hunting ranches where people literally walk in and shoot animals in cages. Can this be coming out of our zoos? What are the regulations?
No, it can't, Catherine. Certainly not canned hunts. The AAZPA does not condone canned hunts. It's as much a tragedy to us that this is happening as any other animal rights group, and we would like to see this stop. We have an ethics code that our members are obligated to abide by. We've heard a lot of allegations, gosh, over the last few years, but we really haven't had any substantial proof. If we did, we could do something about it.
There's substantial proof right now that the San Diego Zoo has sold animals to hunting ranches. Are any ethics charges being brought against them?
The USDA is currently investigating Ocean World on charges that the animals have been abused during training. All the mission statements,
Kathy,
all the
I can't
guidelines,
speak on
all the
behalf
ethics
of
in the
Ocean World. They aren't a member of our organization. However, I can speak on behalf of the San Diego Zoo. Back in September, the San Diego Zoo said that inadvertently they did sell 2 animals to a dealer. And please allow me to finish this because there's something very important that I want to read, a piece of a document that I brought with me
Karen, I
today.
apologize. We don't have the luxury of that much time, but let's deal with, in fact, the regulations to prevent this from happening rather than taking up that individual case.
Well, Catherine, I think some very serious allegations have been leveled here, and I think there needs to be a very brief word of explanation, if it's all right. In this case, the San Diego Zoo, unfortunately, did not know that the status of this ranch had changed. And they were the first to admit that there was a problem, and they recalled those animals, but they had absolutely no idea. Since that time, they've come up with a brand new document that says that they will send a member of their zoo to every single facility in which they're going to send animals to assure that that animal will be put into the right hands.
Okay.
However, when animals are sold to dealers, the people at the zoos may not know where those animals end up.
And they wash their hands of it.
Exactly. The problem begins at the zoos with overbreeding. Baby animals bring in people, and people keep keep the zoos running, and that's unfortunately the bottom line in this case.
And if we're going to educate people at zoos, we've got to educate them that baby animals are not the thing that they need to have, that this is not good for the animal, and it's not good for species conservation, it's not good for habitat, and it's not good for the zoos overall.
Let's talk about contraception. You haven't talked anything about, or you haven't said anything about all the contraceptive programs that are going on in professionally run zoos.
I'm waiting to hear what they are.
Well, we have VAS plugs, we have immunocontraception. Sometimes it's just a matter of simply separating the sexes. But the point
Which isn't being done enough to stop the surplus problem.
The dealer's business is booming.
Well, surplus is not inevitable. If we're going to maintain viable genetic populations of a number of populations of animals, we will have surplus.
We're also talking about animals who aren't necessarily endangered in these cases. And to what end are we preserving these species, these viable genetic
Well, Kathy, I have a question for you. My understanding is that PETA would rather see animals or species go extinct than to have them saved in zoos. Am I correct, or is this a misunderstanding on my part?
I think that's an oversimplification. I think under any circumstances...
just said that on National Public Radio in September.
Well, I can answer for PETA right now, and I think under any circumstances we don't want to see animals in cages at all. As I said before, what we would like to see zoos doing is rehabilitation of injured wild animals who can then be returned to the wild.
Kathy, let me interrupt and ask you a question. Let me interrupt and ask a question real quickly, and that is, in China, the panda, do we have a right then, a global community, to go in and say we want this animal preserved in its habitat, even if you say it's your country, that the world has some interest in preserving these? That's a very difficult situation, is it not, Kathy?
I think in its own habitat, certainly the world has an interest in it, and I agree with Karen that we all have an interest in preserving the biological diversity of our planet, but not inside zoos, not inside naturalistic habitats, in the actual habitats where the animals come from, in China, where the animals belong,
and that's
not in the national zoo.
A prime question, too, is the zoos are not as involved as they should be in habitat conservation programs, in, if you will, in situ conservation. We've got a very much a divided question.
Are you familiar with our latest report on the number? We have over 300 different programs going on globally.
Yes, I know. Wildlife Conservation International and Bill Conway are very involved in
the Minnesota Zoo has an Adopt a Park program.
Okay, let me interrupt because we're going to come to the final question here in just a moment. It's obvious. Can the two sides come to a compromise? Stay with us.
At Value Right Pharmacies, you'll always find great American values, just like these. Add a little Braun to your holiday gift list. The Braun 10-cup coffee maker is $29.99. Or pick up the #1 selling foil shaver in the world, the Braun razor with cord. Or shave another item off your gift list with a rechargeable Braun razor, just $49.99. Look in the yellow pages for participating Value Right Pharmacies. There's one near you.
We have everything under the sun. The American paradise. The United States Virgin Islands.
I crave snacks, but sometimes those calories have to be tabled. No problem. I've got Wrigley's Spearmint Gum. The great taste I love and only 10 little calories. Instead of munching, I enjoy pure chewing satisfaction.
This is beautiful.
How much? Pulsar? Pulsar.
I think he wants your watch.
Some things in life are worth far more than they cost.
No thank you.
Pulsar, there's no time like it.
On CNN Today, is religion playing a greater or lesser role in your life? Keeping the faith on early prime. Then on Showbiz Today, go behind the scenes of a Thanksgiving Day parade. All today on CNN.
Returning to our guests now, all of you share the love and concern for animals. Nancy, what's the compromise?
Catherine, I think the compromise is, first, PAWS and AAZPA are now already working together. There are some issues that we have strong disagreements on, but we do recognize that zoos are going to be with us for a while, and that we have got to work to make things best for the animals, to stop exhibiting ones that cannot be exhibited properly, to get a handle on the surplus problem, to get zoos to understand their responsibilities all the way down the line for these animals. And AAZPA and PAWS are already trying to work on those issues and to give the animal rights people a forum within AAZPA to talk about these things and to say, if to do your job properly, you've got to listen to us. Already zoos have said, because of what the animal rights community has criticized us for, some changes have been made. And
Karen, let me bring Karen into this. What do you think?
I'm sorry, Catherine?
Karen, your position, compromise?
I'm compromise, perhaps more an open line of communication. I think Nancy's absolutely right. We have spent a lot of time talking with her, and we aren't going to agree on everything, but I think our hearts are in the right place. Unfortunately, and I've got to perhaps direct this at PETA, a lot of times allegations are made, charges are lobbed against us that aren't necessarily accurate. And it's very difficult. People don't always remember who made the allegations. They just remember the allegations.
Kathy? Yes, I think there's room for compromise, certainly. I think that animals should stop being businesses where, zoos should stop being businesses where animals are put on display for fun and profit and should become sanctuaries and rehabilitation centers that really do help animals.
Kathy Guillermo, Karen Usi, and Nancy Blaney, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And tomorrow on Crier Company is the phrase, boys will be boys, contributing to what appears to be a growing trend toward violence in men. We'll examine what makes some men violent. Is it innate or is it learned? That's tomorrow on Crier Company. Now, if you'd like to write to us, send your letters to P.O. Box 740166, Atlanta, Georgia, 30374-0166, or you can fax us at 404-681-3578. I'm Catherine Crier. Have a happy Thanksgiving. Thanks so much for watching. Now, what's coming up on NewsHour, Bobby?
Catherine, thanks. Coming up in a few minutes, a look at Thanksgiving celebrations from a street-level view in New York to a bird's-eye view in space. We'll show you the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade in New York. Enjoy a front row seat on the street as the parade passes you by. And waking up to a celebration that is out of this world, we'll drop in on a Thanksgiving feast in space. That and more just ahead on NewsHour.
Coming up, NewsHour, followed by Sonia Live after a word from your local cable system here on CNN.
Nothing brings us closer together than Christmas. The wonderful carols, songs, and hymns we've loved for generations. This Christmas, Time Life Music invites you and your family to share a marvelous collection of America's best-loved songs and carols by the renowned Mormon Tabernacle Choir. Announcing Christmas Celebration, more than 50 of your holiday favorites. A musical celebration of faith. These beautiful hymns and carols will add warmth and sparkle to your holidays for years to come. Christmas Celebration, nearly 2.5 hours of beautiful songs and carols. Yours for only $19.99 for 3 LPs or 2 double-length cassettes. Just $26.99 for 2 compact discs. This year, celebrate Christmas with the most joyous holiday music ever. Christmas Celebration from Time Life Music. Here's how to order.
Call 1-800-257-1257. Have your credit card ready and call 1-800-257-1257. Or send just $19.99 for 3 records or 2 double-length cassettes, or $26.99 for 2 compact discs. plus $4 shipping and handling to Mormon Tabernacle Christmas Celebration, P.O. Box 8250, Atlanta, Georgia.